shared something?
Yeah, a story.
What the whole
everybody? Twitch community, YouTube community that can't watch it because it's not simultaneously streaming. We are back for another installment of our chat about hobby-related things, and I'm excited to say we're joined by Martin and Bill, and we're going to talk about a recent event. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, nice to have y'all here. I just put a story on Instagram with a link to this Twitch stream such that precious few people might see.
That's
and just in time so I couldn't reshare it.
Nice. Amazing.
Perfectly orchestrated.
That's
always
sick.
Always
Thanks for having us, guys.
planned here. No, nice to have you all here. I perhaps with this in mind, so we don't retread stuff, since I want to record this separately for the podcast. I'm just gonna do another introduction because everyone watching these streams likes to hear 2 introductions.
Yeah,
yeah.
So we're gonna do it.
Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
Oh,
Who do we have? Do we have anybody watching the stream?
It says 2, but it's probably me and Greg.
I'm watching.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna start recording and do the basic podcast intro. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a miniature wargaming podcast from the people behind the blog Between the Bolter and Me. And in today's episode, I'm joined with Adam and Greg Wire. Hey, Adam.
Hey.
Greg.
Hey.
And excitedly, we are here with 2 other wonderful individuals, people who were involved in the Rich Grimmond event, Martin McCoy and Bill Ford. Nice to have you both here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, I did that introduction differently for some reason. Different than the last 100 episodes. I'm not sure why.
Shaking it up.
Yeah, right. That's true. But yeah, so we're really excited to have you both here. A little bit after the Rich Grimmond event in Richmond, Virginia, where we played a whole host of interesting 28 themed games, and the both of you actually hosted an Inc. 28 style event called the Rot of Hondious. And yeah, we just wanted to have you on today to chat a little bit about it. We chatted, at least with you, Martin, about it on the actual days of the event in a previous sort of interview style podcast, but thought it would be fun to a few weeks later to reflect on it and just chat about how it went and what we think, what went well, what could be improved, what we're excited about in the future. And it also rectifies the sadness that we didn't get to talk to Bill during the interview style podcast at the event. Just too many things going on.
Oh yeah, excited to be here and rehash it. And it's nice to be doing this with Bill too, because it's kind of like a live dissection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how y'all feel about it, but I'm still recovering, I think, a little bit. I've been kind of busy and just it was a big undertaking, and Bill and I went from talking every day and catching up about planning, and then I think we were both just tired, must rest.
Yeah.
How have you been doing, Bill?
Doing great, but yeah, it's I burned up a few PTO days leading up to the event and put off a lot of work stuff, and so all that Monday morning came around. I had the Sunday scaries real bad when I was flying home from Richmond. So I've been super busy.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, I guess maybe for the benefit of the audience, Bill, would you like to just kind of briefly describe, I guess, the event and the Rot of Hondious event? Because I feel we can touch on both.
Yeah, just a quick little overview. So
yeah.
Hondious was a planet that Martin came up with that is in a dusty, kind of forgotten, neglected corner of the galaxy that no one really had any interest in. There was little to no resources, no reason for the Imperium to colonize it whatsoever. So it was kind of a discarded planet. And the only reason why it came to the forefront in Imperial politics or anything whatsoever of significance is the planet had Martin found a plague called I think it's called the Dancing Joy, the Dancing Plague or something like that.
Yeah, it was like the dancing plague in Bavaria or Germany in like the 1400s.
Yeah, it killed allegedly, quote unquote, like 140 some odd people, and he found this disease and like this is wicked as hell. So we wrote that in, and it was a means of giving a compelling reason for people to care about this neglected, crappy planet. Right? That's awful. That's so awful that the Imperium like isn't even going to bother colonizing it. So people infected with this disease called the Red Joy, they dance so hard that they neglect their bodily functions, and eventually it becomes sentient as it infects psychers on the planet. And so these psychers come together and form kind of like these amalgamations of a fusion of flesh and bone and sinew, and more importantly, kind of telekinetic energy and psychic abilities. And so as it becomes sentient, becomes aware of itself, it then starts to spread and gather more and more psychers, more powerful ones. And its ultimate goal is to kind of spread and project itself psychically off planet. And with the Imperium kind of stretched thin in that area of the galaxy, this is at some point that the Inquisition has to take action and can't ignore anymore.
But they only take a little bit of action. Like only like 4 fucking Inquisitors come there. It's like those
too many
dumb fucks. Yeah.
It was important to me that like to kind of like write or suggest an imperial sector that has like very few resources and is like underfunded and like the exterminatus or whatever it's called when they just bomb a planet isn't available. That it's like we can send in these 5 psychos and hope they could do something, but like we're like the imperial colonies in this sector are like overtaxed already trying to suppress Red Joy outbreaks on their planet. So they're like, it's very desperate. Because this exterminatus can feel like such a, I don't know, end all be all. Once it's like, once you think about it as available to like all imperial sectors, like that would be like a pretty serious weapon that I think narratively is fun to limit.
But also, I think for where the planet is and how little they care about it, you would imagine it would cost an obscene amount of money to even do such like an orbital bombardment to like really destroy the whole planet. So I feel even now, when they know this is a threat, they're still trying to decide, is this even worth it? Like, no, I don't think it is. So I sort of feel that fits well with the whole situation.
I think it's a good idea limiting it too, because I feel for a while, or oftentimes with Games Workshops, like generic Inquisitors and stuff, they're like so, I don't know, like mustache twirling, evil, hardline people that like it's just exterminatus this, exterminatus that, like kill everything and everybody, everyone's a heretic, and they're like almost too hyperbolic to be interesting.
Yeah.
And I think by limiting that potential and like forcing them to actually investigate and do other things is more interesting and allows for the development of more interesting characters.
Yeah, certainly.
Sometimes the like fiction and lore of 40K could feel like almost like propaganda from like the imperial cult or whatever. Like this is how it would look from people who are very brainwashed already. That like the Inquisitors would be everywhere and super well backed and have access to like the worst weapons, and the Space Marines are legion and they're everywhere and they're unstoppable. And it's kind of fun to like pick at that a little bit and be like, well, what if that is like maybe a facade, and the reality is that they're a little bit more stretched thin, and they're just like putting up this illusion because that's how they hold a chokehold over the empire.
I sort of feel that is in fact the case. It like has to be based on
beset on all sides.
Definitely in some sectors, like it would have to be like just like the illusion of control.
Yeah. And there were no Space Marines in the event. Incredible.
God damn.
That's the mark and the sign of a cool event.
That's impressive. No Space Marines. Let's
go ahead.
I was gonna say, didn't Tyler have a Space Marine model used to convert something? Convert
there
the one model.
There were a few Space Marine adjacent looking things, most of which I think were either. I think they were mostly like servitors and stuff. I don't even think there were necessarily a traditional like power armored Inquisitor per se. Like
no Ultramarines. Ultramarines make everything better. Everyone knows that.
You could make that argument.
No one could. No one
could. Yeah.
So it might be useful to explain also that Rot of Hondious was a narrative event that happened within a larger like Grimdark meetup that I've been calling Rich Grimmond, but some people that's what I'll call it, whatever.
Just call it that.
So that was like a 3 linked narrative games that were played by 12 people, kind of narrowing down to a final 3rd mission that was gonna only involve 4 players, but we tried to tweak it to involve everybody if they wanted. But the larger event was just like an invitation to people in the community that we kind of knew and through Rust We Trust Discord, and then a larger internet shout out later to come to Richmond Public Library for 2 days and game and do whatever you want to do together. Just have a general meetup and you can plan whatever you want to do. And I think it'd be interesting to kind of talk about the success of both sides of that because like I felt that both were really fun. I had a really good time. But I think both have things that could be learned from them or like shared with the larger community, because an interest in doing the whole Rich Grimmond meetup was to learn a little bit more about event planning and how to make it work and get the most people most cheaply together for the longest period of time to have the most fun. And definitely having Bill here helping was like crucial to that. And I think I would be interested to hear Bill's take on it, having run now 2 of these events. A real vet of the American Inquisitor or like Mordheim meetup space, which is rad.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it went really well. I'd like to kind of kick it back to the floor, so to speak. How did you think it went overall in terms of like the larger event, like Rich Grimmond, Martin?
I thought it was great. I think it was taxing, and I would love to figure out some way. I don't know if Labor Day or if it could be hosted on a longer chunk of weekend. Like it was hard to get everybody together and have like two full days even. Like for a lot of people, it was just Saturday, which was really fun. And I think in some ways, like even Saturday was a lot. But we, like the 5 of us at least, all got to do Friday, Saturday, and that was great.
I think.
And go ahead.
I think on all of the events we've been to, there's always sort of a struggle with that, trying to figure out how much time you can allot to the event, particularly if there are people traveling to it, which almost always there are. Everyone sort of has a different like arrangement with like work and all of that and just your general life and everything, such that I feel having too much longer than 2 days is often pretty hard. And then there will always be like people that are only able to make it to the 1 day. So I think trying to figure out a way to maximize the amount of time where people are able to interact to both play games and also just to sort of hang out and chat, because I think the ability to meet and like just chat with people is often one of the things I like the most. So
I thought it, for at least pretty much all of us, like, yeah, in this chat, we arrived, or in your case, Martin, you were already there, but arrived Thursday evening and were able to get together for a little bit and then have the Friday to kind of help set up, play some games and so forth, then Saturday do the main Hondious event. And I thought that was really nice because it spread things out a little bit, and allowed for some just sort of socialization time and not be like too focused, need to do this event right away. And I think that was good. But yeah, like obviously not everyone had the opportunity to do that, which made it like cram it all into 1 day, which is hard. But I think with what we got to experience, I think it was a pretty nice length in that
I think that's a good reminder for me to hear that it, like 2 days with like a soft first day seems very ideal, because even I had like the opportunity to do Sunday. Like some people were going to the game store that we were doing like the end of Saturday night and possibly Sunday in, and I was like, I'm so beat. I am going straight to bed. I'm not gonna do that. So it could have been 3 days, but it maybe one of the most costly things, and it was like a negotiation, was this decision to do it at a public library, which on the one hand I'm really into because I love public libraries and I think they're underutilized and they're a free resource that people in all communities across the US have some access to. So it's like a duplicatable thing. Was great, but at the same time we had to stop on Saturday at 5, and that added like a lot of pressure that wouldn't have existed otherwise. It allowed us to do a free event where I wasn't putting down a deposit for a like event hall that I don't know how many people are coming. Like there's
that end. Does anyone remember, this is for like closing at 5 seemed a bit early, but at our Pilgrim event 2016, I kind of remember even that, which was at Warhammer World, even like it closed at like 6 or something.
Yeah, we did
does
have
anyone
to,
remember?
I
feel
remember
like
the
it
exact
closed
time, but it was
felt
not
kind of early. And it wasn't
yeah.
like into the evening
No.
or 8 or something. So I just bring that up because even some spaces like that still aren't necessarily going to be open forever.
Well, yeah, you could
I
sort
don't
of
know if
like,
that
oh my
was.
gosh, playing at Warhammer World, where the game was created, like the most ideal setting, and which, I mean, in some regards, yes, but I think every venue has its pros and cons. But I think the library, in this case, was very nice. The lighting was great. There were nice bathrooms. It was easy to get to. There were parking garages and other things for that. So in that sense, like, I thought it was very good. And one of the big things, the lighting was very good. So
I love that room.
All of that helped a lot, particularly if you were excited to try and get a whole bunch of pictures and other stuff like that to document it. But I think in some regards, while maybe you are forced to plan out the event more, ending at 5 is not, I wouldn't necessarily say is a bad thing, because even if you're there from like 9 or from 10 till 5, that's still a lot of time. And if you're playing a bunch of games, unless you're like one of those tournament gamers who have conditioned yourself to be ready and willing to like be standing and rolling dice and forcing stuff in for hours, like it's tough.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Bill, with the Mordheim event, how did that work out with your venue? You were at a bar, right?
Yeah, but it was the same thing, like there's, like Adam said, there's pros and cons to both. Like it depends on what kind of event you're running and like who's coming. Like one of the things in hindsight that I didn't take into consideration with it being in a bar is like if someone's in recovery, right? So there's like pros and cons to like both things. Like I think we closed, or they kind of started shooting us out around 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
We could, yeah, but like on the second day we couldn't get there until they opened at 11. So it was like the same amount of time on the second day. But I think the first day we were there for like 8 hours or something. They opened early for 2 hours for us. We tipped the bartender, and then we stayed till 5 or 6. So that was a long day. But like Adam said, like unless you're wearing Dr. Scholl's and you've got memory foam cushions in your feet, I got high arches, so I can't do that. It's a lot of standing and a lot of mental load too.
Yeah, in some ways, that break from the library closing and then going to the game store was, I think, beneficial. It was like a restart. It let us split up and get dinner separately, which was another thing that we kind of like made a choice to do, is not kind of be beholden to like coordinating feeding where we're all eating together all the time. Like a couple meals where we're like, go find like between library and game store, like everybody go find dinner. That's fine. There's 25 of us. It's going to be a nightmare if we're all going to Papadino's or whatever. So let's meet back up. And I think maybe that's like a good note for future gaming planning, is like, don't expect to be in the same spot the entire day, but have like a place that that can hold people, and you can go play like more casual games or Heroes Quest or like Magic the Gathering, because people still want to hang out and chat, and you want to break from holding down that one spot endlessly.
Yeah, I think that was nice. Like, and even like for Saturday closing at 5, it just gave more opportunities to like get something to eat somewhere. Like, do you need to freshen up, take a shower, do whatever. And I think that worked. And particularly if you were there like the previous day and such, like I feel if you can get that being like 1 hour less or something on Saturday, like I don't think that matters that much. Whereas like for a bunch of like the Hive Scum crew, like they basically were only there for the full of Saturday, and I can see in that case you want those extra hours. But I think if it's separated a little bit, it's maybe not as critical. And I kind of like how in this case the main like Inc. 28 event was the Hondious event, but it was kind of reserved for Saturday, and I think that was nice to like basically like it's carved into the like Friday time, like play what you like, do what you like, and that I think was nice, because in a lot of these sorts of things, from my experience, the best part is just hanging out with old friends, new friends, looking at models, chatting, and so forth. Because a huge part I feel about a lot of events is just the build up to it. People building models, sharing them online through Instagram or a shared Discord or things like that. And that's a big part of it. And then to see all those things in person and like not just rushing into that, like the instant you get together, I think is good.
I also think it worked particularly well. I think a lot of people, this maybe was their first time playing Forbidden Psalm, and we were using a slightly modified rule set. So I know on that Friday, people were playing all sorts of different games, but a lot of people played sort of like practice games, trying to figure out the rule set, because I think a lot of people, and myself included, was like, I'm going to try and play a few games beforehand, so I'll have a good sense of what's going on. That obviously didn't happen. But that Friday, I had a chance to watch some games, kind of discuss the rules and stuff like that. And I think that was a nice way to sort of ease yourself into it. And if you hadn't fully made your list, like, you had time to do that, and I think that worked well.
Yeah, I think there was something I found it to be pretty successful to have that first day where we didn't do any Hondious stuff.
Yeah.
Like, definitely for the benefit of Bill and I, where we both got to chat with people and relax and play some games and not have that pressure of like, okay, from day one, we're doing this narrative event. And then I think something I would definitely want to replicate, I think doing another narrative event would be having it framed around like a general meetup, because I think it made everything like more digestible and fun if you weren't feeling it, if like the third battle was too full. Like, I know Steve was kind of like, I can't pay attention to this like round of activation. I'm going to go like do an interview. Like, it kind of not having it be so hyper focused on one thing let people, I think, have more fun, and more people come and hang out and talk and show their miniatures that we couldn't really accommodate, that like narratively would have been too tough. And that maybe some people just like, I don't care about that planet, who cares? I want to do turnip or whatever. That felt like one of the more
even real people don't care about Hondious, not just inquisitors and people from the Imperium.
Well, so actually, I have a general question. How many games were you hoping to have everybody play? Was it to have everyone play up to 3 games like what was done, or did you have to sort of change things on the fly? And because I know at least I was, of the 3 of us, I was the one that played, and I think overall it went surprisingly smoothly, and the different scenarios and stuff I think were thematic and worked well. But the only thing was, during the 3rd game, since each game 3 people were playing at once, even with the small war bands, after around 3 turns, that had already lasted at least like an hour, maybe more than an hour. So it sort of became apparent that the games can't go too much longer than 3 or 4 turns. So that I feel is maybe the only thing. Like, if you're having an event where you're hoping to play 3 or 4 games, really trying to figure out like the warband size and all that stuff to make it such that you can relatively comfortably finish a game in about an hour. Like, I think that is important and could allow people to have a little more time in between games to kind of either go and eat something or just sit down for a little while.
Is there a question in there, Adam?
Oh, yeah. So I guess the question was, how many games were you hoping people play, to get back to it?
Can we leave that part in the podcast? That'd be really funny.
No, it's gonna.
Oh, yeah.
I love rambling.
20 games.
Yeah,
20
I think like the
games.
number started at 3 and then shot up to 20 at Greg's suggestion, and then came back down to 5, or 4 or something like that. And then I think like a couple weeks before, Martin and I were talking on the phone, and I was just like, we were just like, you know what, we need to keep it 3 to actually leave room for people to kind of like move amongst themselves, talk, give some time between games. And as it turned out, like, hell, we only had, I think, like 15 minutes between the first game and second game. People were like scarfing down pizza, and I was like, yo, back to the table.
Yeah.
You gotta go.
People were such good sports about it too.
Yeah, they really were. I mean, they were like, oh crap, all right, man, I'm sorry. And they were apologizing, like, dude, this is just games. Fine.
But it is serious. Get back to the table.
Well, towards that end, what was this a reflection, having like no one having really played the game much before? I mean, like, I hadn't. I mean, I was kind of had read the rules, or the original Forbidden Psalm rule set a little bit, but hadn't actually played it. Do you think this is something about just not being super familiar with the game, or just in general thinking more could be fit in? Because I kind of think that is something that I've seen at most of the events I
Mm-hmm.
have been involved in, that less games occur than are predicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels true. Sorry, you go, Phil. You
Oh
got
no,
this.
go ahead.
Well, I don't know what I was going to say. I think the first game went long just because everybody was looking at their models, and that's like it was
Mhm.
a comfortable speed to play a game, but it
Yeah.
wasn't the speed that you need to play a game within a narrative constraint. Like the
Yeah.
second
Mhm.
game, we like on the fly called, I think we're going to limit it to 3 if you want 4 turns. Don't go longer than that. And then I think Bill and I both kind of tried to like shepherd the games along and answer just like make rulings and try and push up the speed a little bit while still having fun. But that feels like kind of necessary. But you also had mentioned the idea that maybe a smaller warband could have been.
Yeah, I think the warband size was, I think, already relatively small, which I think is good. And I think always the first game is going to take longer because I feel most of the people coming to these, even if they play a lot of games, it's probably not this game, whatever the rule system they're using is. So there needs to be some time to kind of get familiar with it and ease into it. So I think that went well, and I think in terms of going forward, like making new events, like if you're coming up with scenarios and different objectives for different warbands and everything, really trying to figure out, can these different warbands actually accomplish these tasks in like a 3-turn limit, stuff like that, because you don't necessarily want people to feel like oh, my quests, I could never do those, and this other person, all they had to do was walk to this side of the or something like that. But I think overall, at least the stuff in the games that I played, they were pretty similar, and most of them you could accomplish, or at least have the illusion of accomplishing within 3 or 4 turns. So I think that is often good. And I mean, if you look at Warcry, for instance, the semi-newer, like Age of Sigmar skirmish game, all of the scenarios are 4 turns. So I think there sort of is a tendency now, at least in more modern games, to start limiting the turns. So I think it's a good number.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like where I was thinking that like maybe it was a rule system that I feel most of the players maybe hadn't played before, which I think perhaps slows stuff down a little bit. But I think the biggest thing is something like we had sort of touched on, is just most of the people getting to an event like this. It's not like you see each other every week at like your local gaming club and are very familiar with one particular rule set. Like everyone wants to chat a little bit, and you want to learn what are the scenarios and like all these things. I think will always slow that sort of stuff down. In particular, if you do want to have foster a narrative style storytelling,
Yeah.
collaborative storytelling thing, that's always going to slow stuff down because it isn't just like a tournament game where it's just like everyone has very defined objectives. They looked at the mission packet for weeks leading up to it, and
Yeah.
like no time is of the essence. Like that's just not what these things are about. But I think, as Adam, you suggested, running events, like when I'm thinking about it, I think it is really important to try to take as much of that into account as possible, just to have it as smooth and possible, and possibly just to relieve the organizer's stress a little bit. Like, 'cause I assume that kind of had you stressed in the sense like, oh man, should we call it now, or like how can we trim this down? And yeah, I feel that maybe is a good consideration, and it sounds like you were considering it all throughout, but it's always something that can be fine-tuned.
Yeah, for sure. And like the objectives were written, I think like we wanted to do 5 turns or something. So I think the objectives were written with that in mind, and then we had to make. I had forgotten what the objectives were, truth be told, because I had sealed them in those friggin' envelopes. So and then Martin was like, "Hey, we need to shave. We gotta shave this down to like turn 4s, maybe, but preferably turn 3 turns." I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And of course, like some people were like, "Well, I had to get my guys all the way across the border. There's physically no way of me doing that." I'm like, "Oh man, welcome to Hondious."
Yeah, shit sucks. Bad stuff happens. No, but I think at least Martin.
I think one of the things that comes to mind that maybe we could have done differently to speed things up, not so much for the benefit of playing more or faster, but we're doing that with the idea that it would allow people to socialize and tell stories more. Would be maybe try and do like a big Discord call or voice hangout where we all made war bands like the week before, because I think that was something that people hadn't collectively done really, is made war bands. And then we could have also done like a quick demo of like, hey, here's the rule set as we understand it. And that's like, I think Bill and I were both real busy. Like Bill particularly was working some absolute magic with those objectives and like the staining of the paper. Like that's something we definitely have to touch on, was like the material props that Bill brought were like added so much to me. But I think if we could have found some time to try and do that, and even just get like half the players on a call and make war bands together. Yeah, it looks so good.
Can I maybe ask a question that could maybe kind of lead into those like props and whatnot? So the setting for this Hondious event, I think, is pretty imaginative and cool. What was some of the inspiration behind it, and what were some of perhaps things that you looked for to help flesh it out?
I think I'll answer the first part, and then I think I kind of came up with a good chunk of the setting, and then Bill really was like, took that and fleshed it out like very effectively through all of the periphery and like all these great ideas. The inspiration for it was wanting to create a horrifying thing that also was compelling in like a human way, kind of empathetic, and do something like that's not evil, and kind of get away from like dark gods and traitor legions and huge conspiracies, and create something kind of small and just specific to a planet, like a alien plague that isn't connected to Tyranids or anything larger. It's just like biology interacts with humans in bad ways sometimes, and then maybe the bad way is horrifying to look at, but is also happy and joyful in the people's twisted brains. And then like just loving the idea of like fallen sci-fi colony worlds that have collapsed into medieval feudalism. And then Bill, we had talked about that, and you really helped me shape and like edit a lot of this like long rambling ideas down. And then what were the props that you were able to bring in, and what did you, I don't know, want to bring to it? What felt, I don't know. I can't ask a question. And Bill,
So-
props, yes?
Yeah. Say prop or prompt?
Props.
Fine. So like the props are just, I mean, Anna from Gardens of Hecate, she's I've been a big fan of her stuff for a long time, and one of the things that she does well is like she creates props, right? just like if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons or any sort of tabletop role playing game, and your game master comes out with like these props that kind of help, it just takes you that one extra step, right, into immersing yourself in the world. Because we all have these things kind of floating around in our back pockets, so it's really easy to get distracted, right, or to like really care about why you're rolling dice. So we made secret objectives for every single retinue or warband that came to the event. And Martin and I spent a good long time talking about them, coming up with good ideas that tell kind of a small backstory as to the history of the planet, who these evil, rotten a-holes are on the planet, and just how awful they are. Just kind of to showcase and highlight some of the misery that goes along with it, with the planet. And so we came up with these objectives. We stained them, put them into, actually, we have a lot of leftover envelopes from our wedding that I used. Sorry, Haley. But put them in there, and then I created wax seals. So I went in and sculpted 3 different ones for the 3 different factions, and I sketched some of them out and sent to Martin, like, what do you think of this? And he's like, oh, it looks awesome. Like, have you thought about this? And we could just compare notes. And then I made 3 wax stamps for the 3 different factions. And then on the inside of those objectives, I had a rubberized stamp made actually for another event, potentially in the future, where I made the Inquisition stamp, and then the double-headed eagle, the Imperial stamp for the feudalists. And then I just flicked corn or blood for the blood god, that technical paint on the red joys.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like everyone had a primary and secondary objective that Martin could probably speak more to about as to the mechanics and the kind of the pace of the event. But we also had, Martin and I were talking on the phone one time. We're like, man, how are we going to keep track of, who gets to play in this last game, right? And I forget who came up with it. It was like, man, what if we had teeth, right? Like the red joy and that rictus smile.
For sure.
Like we can get these teeth, right? And then we can put in, or where are we going to keep track of? Martin's like, well, let's just use a friggin' Mancala board. And so he had this Mancala board made, and then the night before the event, or on Thursday night, Martin was like slapping some paint on it. But yeah, so we used the teeth to kind of keep track of how many primary and secondary objectives people had obtained lead up to the final event. I'm trying to think what else.
You also, didn't you, Bill, put together some like little short stories and stuff, and like these like little PDF magazines kind of leading up to have just some bits of narrative to help establish the setting and so forth. And I think that was cool. And that, including all the stuff you've been talking about, are just nice ways of getting people kind of involved into the setting and just doing world building itself, which I think is cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we had issues of the Rot. I think we had 4 or 5, and there's a 6th one that I'm gathering some stuff from other participants right now. But they're just short stories and just short little, no more than 1,000, 1,500 word short story pieces of fiction to, like you said, Eric, kind of flesh out the world and make it seem like a living, breathing place. Because I think we kind of take that for granted on Imperial planets. It's Imperial planet. Like everyone's miserable, working 16 hours a day. They all look the same, right? But then we also had the event packet itself. So at the front, we had the world building stuff and kind of some of like Martin's and I's like expectations, like, hey, like here's the number of people you can have. Here's the rule set that we're using. Here's kind of like a general, I wouldn't say mood board because it didn't have a whole lot of pictures on there, but it just had an introduction to the faction, kind of a historical historian's perspective on the event, the Hondious event or the Rot of Hondious, kind of like fictitious Imperial scholars kind of looking back in retrospect. And then on the second half of it was Steve, South of Heaven. I think Martin pitched the idea out, or Steve approached him, or Martin approached him about this rule set, right? And what kind of rules we were going to use, because we needed something that was, I guess, sleek or elegant enough to be learned in a very short amount of time, but fleshed out enough to the point where we're not just like pushing toy soldiers around like GI Joes like we're 5 years old, right? We need some sort of infrastructure in place. And so Steve took, I think, a hack of Brothers of Prometheum. I think I'm getting that right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a hack of the Last War. Is that what it's called? One of the Forbidden Psalm variants.
Yeah, so it was like a hack thrice removed. And so he went in and kind of like tweaked some things, put Martin's like awesome artwork, which we need to talk about that too.
Yeah.
Awesome artwork on the background of it. Yeah, and so with that, I mean, we really wouldn't have had any sort of, like I said, infrastructure to be able to even play the game. So we had that packet as well. Oh yeah, there it is.
Were you, or like now reflecting back on it, are you happy with the choice of game system? Like, had you ever been considering like using Necromunda or the Mordheim rule set or anything like that? Had it been what were your thoughts on that? Because I know at least a lot of us probably came to this, like, we're all Games Workshop fans, so we have some familiarity with a lot of Games Workshop games, as they're all pretty similar. Like, had you ever considered using one of those systems, and like what was the discussion there for finding the rule set?
Martin, you could probably speak more on that because way back when you already had the wheels turning about what rule set you wanted to use.
Yeah, I had the idea of Apostle, I think, or Acolyte. It's a kill team, kind of solo cooperative hack of kill team. But I think the rule set we went with is like definitely was the right choice, and Steve did such a great job, and it's like, I think it's sleek and fun, and it has like a lot of room to tailor to the world and the lore. Like, I think it would have been fun to like go through and maybe like change a couple of some of the words and like phrasing, because I think there were still some Brothers of Prometheus shining through in like some of the equipment choices and stuff, but we just didn't have like really the time or energy for it. But as a rule system, I found Forbidden Psalm really like delivered. Absolutely, it let some really fun narrative things happen, and it was really sleek and digestible. And like, I think going with Kill Team or Necromunda would have been a mistake for what we were trying to do. Like, it would have just been a level of depth further than would have added enjoyment and would have just bogged things down. It's like, especially going on what we've been talking about how like so much of the joy is just like being there with people you admire and like want to hang out with, and like, I don't think you're gonna walk away from one of these weekends and be like, boy, you know, I didn't get to talk to many people, but that rule system really had a lot of depth. It really got great.
Also, one thing that I would like to add to that about the rule set sort of creating narrative opportunities and stuff like that, I think maybe the best aspect of the system was the use of the D20 and how that could bring over RPG elements of like a critical failure and a natural 20 roll. Because just that possibility, and if it ever does manifest in a way, can really, without any effort, introduce cool narrative things that get the people involved thinking about, like, holy shit, that actually happened. And one thing that a funny thing that I can mention on, we're in the process of writing a relatively lengthy battle report about all of this, so some of what we're touching on, hopefully you'll be able to read about it soon. But in the final game, we'll say one of the Inquisitors, after things went south, decided, I need to get the fuck out of here, and he was going to teleport out, and lo and behold, it rolled a critical failure, and it's like just perfect.
Yeah.
So some of those things the simplicity of the rule set was great, but just the inclusion of that can really add a lot of depth to it and really encourage the people playing to like, oh fuck, what the fuck happened there, and then they can just kind of come up with funny ideas or like. So I think that very good.
Because rolling a 1 on a d20 is much more of a spectacle than like rolling a 1 on a d6. So I feel that does allow for easier opportunities to have fun things occur even without having specific rules in place for it.
Bill, do you feel the same way that Forbidden Psalm ended up being the best choice? Could you see us having used a different system?
So that was the thing. Like, I think we both agreed that Acolyte was too dense, and then I think I pitched like the Inquisimunda rules or something like that, which is just as bad, if not worse. And then in terms of just like granularity and stuff, right? Because we knew we're like, okay, like, well, we don't want it to be too simple, right? But we need it to be simple enough that it can be learned and be taught in 5 or 10 minutes, that people who aren't gamers like can figure this crap out in very soon and very quickly. I think it worked. I just think like it's kind of like in D&D or like conventional role-playing games, right, where you have like 6 stat blocks and then a whole host of categories fit under this particular statistic, right? It's kind of the same thing with Forbidden Psalm or Last War, but you only have 4 now. So you really kind of have to do some mental backflips to kind of make things fit into one specific category. So I wouldn't say it's like too generic, but I was kind of looking more for something separate for like the psychic abilities.
Okay. Like Presence was doing too much duty as like a character. Yeah.
I think it was doing a lot of lifting there for a lot of number of things.
Was there any other elements that you feel like if you would like, if like would want to run like an event like this, like, because spoilers, I guess the Red Joy gets off planet like a couple years in the future, something could be run with a similar setting, another planet, the space station that gets infected, whatnot, and like let's say you wanted to still use Forbidden Psalm, did anything stand out in the system that you felt really needed to be tweaked, or that you think could be tweaked to, improve it more or make it even, do what you wanted it to?
I mean, I don't know about Martin, but I certainly think so. I mean, I think there's opportunities to improve rule systems. Like one of the things that's really cool about seeing how other people, what their mindsets are, right? And when you go to these meetups, is just what their thought process is. Like Steve's is nothing is sacred. Like you can hack apart stuff, right? And I guess like I part in the back of my mind thought that, but I don't know if I wouldn't say like I had the courage to do it or like knew it was possible, right? It's like, yeah, man, it's like everything is a la carte. So if something isn't working, you can add on to it, bolt on things, take things away if something's too granular. So I certainly think like there's room for improvement in that regard. But like all it would take is just adding a separate line, you know what I mean? Like a separate statistic if you want more granularity, and just moving some of those things that were in this column over into this column, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Well, I know this is something, or someone else continue. I was going to say, one thing that sort of, I mean, I didn't actually plan it, so I can't comment. I was just taking photos and watching events unfold. But one thing I noticed in a lot of the games, people were using the tactics cards, which kind of you could use to like be successful with a roll or something. And we're using them all in a very similar way, in which like I want to use this to like successfully call down an orbital strike and cause maximum damage. And that to me, while is fine, it kind of resulted in some interesting or humorous narrative things, like it seems like it seems like maybe that was a little bit unintentional, and that like if people, regardless of how much you narratively theme stuff and how much people come together to be narrative and focus, like if there's a way to game a system, you're gonna find it and people are gonna use it.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think on that?
Well, that was like we beans the rules on that one, man. Like I think
Okay.
I think Steve like even said that as much in the High Scum podcast. Shout out the High Scum podcast. And they he was like, no, like it was wrong. Like people were just taking it and running with. I think it's only you're supposed to roll the dice. It doesn't do max damage or something like that.
I think
Something to
you
that
could do
effect.
max damage on one of those rolls. Like instead of
Something
doing
like
max
that.
damage on every orbital
Yeah.
strike, you would be rolling for each guy, and maybe you could pick one of them, and you would use your card on that.
Also,
Is
yeah. Or I played in all of the games. The first game, the Inquisitor player went in, they missed, I think, for their orbital strike, so then they whipped out the card to make it successful, then they whipped out the card to make it deal max damage, and then in the second game, the Inquisitor player did the same thing, and then I think the Feudalist player did the same thing as well. So like my warband was hit by 3 orbital strikes, like maximum damage, like every time. And honestly, it didn't really matter. Like in the first game, I feel it honestly helped me because like none of the Red Joy, I was the only Red Joy player to have anyone that had a gun. Like the leader had a shotgun. So it's like they almost couldn't do anything. Like my characters like did almost nothing other than just walk around, maybe kill off some stragglers and
They're
stuff,
dancing around.
and fuse with them.
Fun.
So it honestly narratively worked really well, but I did almost nothing and was just hit by orbital strike after orbital strike. And
you made it to the last round.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think it turned out great, but I don't think some of that was quite as intended. And then even in the last game, the big bad like psychic abomination was almost instantly killed by people just whipping out the maximum damage. And so like I think it ultimately worked out and presented kind of a neat, interesting thing, but it was pretty funny.
If people find a way to game a situation, they're gonna do it.
And we really handed them that in some ways. I think maybe it would have been interesting if you started with that deck at the beginning of the campaign and it didn't refresh between rounds. Or maybe you selected like the card you want, and then you got to select another one in the second round or whatever. I think the rule system was really great for what it did and what Steve gave us this great template, and then we had the opportunity to put as much into it as we wanted, and we were really stretched thin. And I would have loved to do it again and to just play a bunch of games of it and kind of wean down and then try and format the equipment in a way that reflected the kind of overall philosophy of the entire event, which is kind of fast and narrative and easy to digest. Like the way that Forbidden Song and Last War, I think, lay out equipment and the attributes of said equipment is like kind of shuts my brain off when you see it and you're like, oh, a rifle has long piercing bayonet, clumsy or something. I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's too many keywords. So that, like, I think in a lot of ways, this one of the things I'm going to probably take from this event is that you kind of need to do it the first time. You need to get your feet wet and you need to feel it and be like, because if we do Rich Grimmond again next year, like so many more things will just kind of be in place that I'll understand and I won't be so stressed about, and we won't be like running around, and maybe we'll have like more connections that we can lean on, or just know like that we've got the library and we need this many tables, whatever, and then we can devote more time to like playing and seeing how many like weapon variants do we need and how many can we cut or make easier to read.
I kind of feel like, and this has sort of been shining through a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, in particular with the rules, that like in most cases for stuff like this, less is more. Like in some sense, I don't even think you need the tactics cards. I feel that seems kind of like a holdover almost from like role-playing stuff where you need the opportunity to re-roll up one particular die so your player character doesn't get obliterated. But like in this sort of stuff, like no one really cares.
I didn't
like
even
if
have to
someone
roll
died,
dice. Like if that attack came, it's like I'll just use the cards and like that's all I needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel probably just don't even need it. Like you can just strip it down more and more because like just all these people being there with interesting models, scenarios, battlefields, all that stuff. I think that does enough.
Yeah,
But I think like we're saying, like you kind of have to do it and try it before you're like really certain what's going to work. But ultimately, I think it all did work.
Yeah, like there was a whole page of special rules and stuff, which I think some of them were good and did add a lot of stuff, but like ultimately I think you wouldn't need most of them and it would be the same. It would play the same.
Yeah. And that's on us for sure. But that reminds me, I was trying to I know that there were more physical things. Bill made those awesome tactic cards and like bashed together art from Hero Quest, I believe, or Warhammer Quest. So like you had a physical, nice little card in your hand. Like that's another thing that I know you guys are thinking about, or there's been a discussion of a narrative event in between the Bolter and Me future. And I think finding ways, like Bill did such a good job of finding ways to thread the narrative and lore into everything you were touching. That like your packet had art on it, your roster sheet had art on it. The scenarios had a little bit of lore written before the like dry explanational text, and they were weathered. And like I think like some of the most pure joy I saw in the whole campaign was people getting their first like secret objective and cracking the wax envelopes. Was such an awesome thing, and I think it would be really fun to learn from that and expand on it and see like I remember like a week afterwards I was like texting you guys about your possible event, and I was just thinking about like what other senses could you stimulate, like could you get like a sense error and like burn some incense and do like swing some incense around, and or have like a very curated soundtrack that goes with it and smells. And another thing that I would definitely do differently is Bill wrote out all this stuff for people to read, but then there was like this big chunk of conversation that needed to happen where we were organizing players around a table and like introducing what's going to happen next. Okay, it's the beginning of the campaign. Obviously, we have to say something. It's not just like go to your tables. I'm going to give, so I gave an introduction, and it was like off the top of my head, and I really wish I had written it down. And the same thing for the climactic fight, and then like a conclusion, like having a couple things written down just so like maybe I don't read it word for word, but having it there to pull from, I think would have helped with immersion a lot more, because I wouldn't have been kind of like struggling to find words.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
Dude, you're definitely a GM, because you came up with that shit on the fly. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
That was rad.
Yeah, it worked out nicely, I think.
General Motors?
Yeah, I'm a real General Motors. Yeah, it worked, but I think there is it's really fun to see those places for growth and to think about places that I would, if I was listening to this episode and thinking about running something similar, like what we could share with those players to be like, hey, don't forget that there is going to be a dead zone when you get everybody in the room.
Yeah.
What are you going to say to them?
Yeah.
And how do you want to say it?
Well, we were talking about stripping things down. Just strip it down so far that nobody even plays games.
Yeah.
When you said strip down, I thought you were going to say something else.
Not me.
Well, so
are you guys thinking about, is like any of this conversation kind of leaning into your interest in an event you would be running in the future?
Well, yeah, so, I mean, just recently, Eric and I actually played, like, a test game of Necromunda with each person using 5 models, and we're just sort of experimenting, trying to play through different scenarios, kind of figuring out, like, not really knowing anything, like, how long did this take, and so I sort of feel like we're going to try and do our best to do a fair amount of play testing to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what seems too complicated, what takes too long, and then also, like, do these missions and scenarios, do they seem fun, are they stupid? Because I think, as we touched on earlier, you're always going to have some limited amount of time, and figuring out up front how many games you think you can get in, and allowing for time to just hang out or like chill for 30 minutes before playing another game. I think those are big considerations that we want to kind of make some of those decisions. Whether or not we like make the right decision, I mean, you're never going to get everything perfect, but I think a lot of these discussions, just thinking, like, realizing everybody's coming in at a different level, not everyone wants to play as long, not everyone is as interested in, like, say, the rule set or making their lit army list. Maybe they're like, I really like making the models and coming up with a story, and like, I don't really give a fuck about how they play or anything. So all of those are things to consider, and I think streamlining and simplifying things to make the actual play experience fun and not stressful is important. And I think hopefully by play testing some of the stuff, we'll figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I feel the Hondious event, I felt, went remarkably smoothly, and almost everything I think worked quite well, which I think was good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Martin came up with some good tweaks on the fly. Like, initially, we were only going to have the 4 war bands or retinues or whatever participate in the last scenario. And then Martin came up to me and was like, "Oh man, like, I don't want to leave like those other people out. Like, what if we just like allowed them to like still participate in some way, shape, or form?" And so I think he, approached every player and said, "Hey, you can have your essentially warband leader still kind of join in, and then those warband leaders from each faction kind of pull together. That way, everyone could participate."
Yeah. Well, what that was, I think, was cool. I think for the feudal knights, like, everyone, I think, there brought their leader, but for the Inquisition forces, I think only 2 of the Inquisitors came along, and then the other 2 people brought, like, servitors or ogrins and stuff like that, which in that was kind of neat, and I think almost added a narrative element as well. It's like, what happened to those other Inquisitors? Could they just not make it, or were they killed, or like what? Like, honestly, it didn't really matter, but it narratively brought something with almost without anyone really even trying. And I think introducing things like that, I think, can kind of build things into the system that, looking back onto it, it's like, wow, that kind of worked out really well.
Yeah, I think a thing that would be worth trying to plan for is a way for people to fall off or want to keep playing, but want to keep playing at a reduced intensity. Or maybe they don't want a full warband, but they want like 2 guys coming. Like maybe write that into the narrative in some way where like, okay, this faction is winnowing down and only the person with the most victory points still has a full warband and everybody else is taking like a real crushing I don't know, like cull of their ranks and everybody just has 2 guys left. Just an idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Bill, were you going to say something?
No.
Do we want to touch on some other elements of just the rest of the Rich Grimmond event, like the fact that we went to the one gaming store, and which was a pretty great gaming store, like after all of this to play Hero Quest and other things like that? Any just comments on some of those other things? Dead by Lead, Greg, you played that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't playing in the Rot of Hondious, any of those things, but I still played a lot of games throughout the weekend. So I had a really nice time, even if I wasn't involved in the main narrative event. Like lots of people brought generally their own games to play test. So I played Alex's Dead by Lead, the Cowboy Western Skirmish game. Bill, you played in that game with I.
I remember you, Greg.
I shot
Incredible.
you first, almost immediately.
Fuck
The
that
game
asshole.
is pretty brutal, pretty mathy though. Like you're required to do a lot of math in your head to play it. I think that would be something that as you play it a little bit, you get used to it. But I don't know that I was anticipating that initially.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Like
Flames
in
of
that,
Orion, you played that too.
yeah, I played Flames of Orion, which is Steve Hivescum / Under the Dice Steve's mech combat game that I think he designed as a means to not have to read the lengthy BattleTech rulebooks.
But now I
nice.
think they're getting into BattleTech, which is very funny.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
fun.
And
I'm s-
that game was neat and quick. What were you gonna say there, Martin?
Oh, I'm still just trying to like wrap my head around some like general advice that I would maybe give to anybody thinking about running a similar event. And I guess I already hit it, but I think that like exactly to the point of the stories you're sharing right now of being like, I wasn't in the main event, but I got to play these games and that was fun. Feels so important to our narrative event being more successful because like everybody could come and hang out and not everybody had to play this one thing.
Yeah, I feel having room for people to interact in different ways, whether playing in like a story narrative driven thing or just have some pickup games to play and experience new things, all of that, or just time to sit around and chat with people. Having sort of breathing room for people to do different things. And that could also be through changing venues, like going to a nice like hobby shop, like shout out to Battlegrounds. I think it was called Battlegrounds, right? They were great. That having some of those different change of location and everything gives people more choices of how they want to hang out and interact and do things. So I think all of that is good.
I think also getting lunch on the day, if you're running the narrative event, like for sure getting delivered lunch. Like, I don't know how much it would have occurred to me that it was like absolutely crucial, but Bill like knew that it was and like spearheaded being like, we got to do this. We need like delivery pizza. And if everybody had split to go get lunch on Saturday, we would have been toast. We would have never finished our third game. Is there anything else, Bill, that you can think of that you would recommend somebody who's thinking about running an event?
I think it just depends on. I mean, I could wax lyrical about that, but I think it just kind of depends on what type of event you have, right? Like if you have a small, close knit, like kind of group of friends that you're doing something together, more of like a inner collaborative event, or something like Rich Grimmond that is like it's open to literally anyone. All you have to do is get yourself here, and you can engage, or you make room or have enough space for, as Adam said, to engage in whenever you want to, right? Like the spots filled up for Hondious, it's like, that stinks. But the good news is that there are a ton of other really cool games there, like Dead by Lead, like Flames of Orion on Saturday, like Caliban 28. Yeah. Like Mike's game.
Well, I feel
it's
yeah,
really
I feel
important for that
even
kind of stuff.
with an event like the one you had here, like I feel you probably in like that last game where at sort of the last minute you had like, oh, everyone can bring like a model or something. Like that could even allow it for like other people who say like maybe couldn't fit into the whole narrative thing. Like if they made models or whatnot, maybe they could like bring a model or two to some final game or something. So that could also incorporate more people who maybe came in late or didn't have time to do everything. So I think having opportunities to interface with different things, I think is nice.
It wouldn't even have to be the last scenario. It could be
it
like,
wouldn't, honestly. Yeah.
hey, we need like a servitor and like a guard, like kind of narrative guard for mission 2 or whatever. Like, does somebody want to make that and jump in and play them?
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Because that could also allow for like, some people like, I don't want to stand around for like 8 hours playing 3 different games. It's like, but I want to take part in this event and the narrative stuff. But like, so I'll play in one of the games, and like I think that could work really well.
Yeah, like how rad would that have been to just like hop in that third game as like an Averser assassin or something like that?
Yeah,
and
that
try
would
to
be
take
cool.
out the red joy beast. Like, so
that
cool.
would be cool. Or jump in as a space marine.
Get that space marine in there.
Well,
and just by having the large space, it was nice because like, which Hammer Studio or Johnny Lashley, he was there and brought an awesome board that he had built, and like that gave me an opportunity to play a cool game with some of our Reg Church models and take some cool photos, which will likely be a battle report in a little bit. But like that was neat, and just having the space and opportunities to easily facilitate those games was really nice.
Blur's Craft, he made a cool Mordheim board that he brought to allow people to play games of Mordheim on that. So yeah, all of that was nice.
That makes me think about Doug and Cassie from Sleepy Comedy Studio came, and they brought really nice coins and were just like made so much stuff and really contributed like wonderful to the event and Hondious. And I think we had talked maybe early on about maybe approaching Doug about doing like a painting tutorial, or like if he wanted to do like a demonstration or something of painting. And I think that's a cool idea, but in hindsight, I think one of the things that was successful about it is that we didn't plan out what happened once people got there very much. We were like, we know we're going to run this event. We're not going to like really block out time for anything else. Like it's just like free play, whatever you guys want to do. Because I don't think it would have been like even fair to Doug to try and kind of get that like and hold that attention of the energy of that room was like very like I'm having a great time. I'm seeing everybody. I can't pay attention to shit.
Uh-huh.
So I think I would recommend that as well, as like kind of have a focus for if there's a narrative event, but don't think that you could plan too much beyond that. If you've got like more than 12 people, that is probably going to be kind of like, and everybody's adults who have brought their toys, like they're going to figure out things to do as it like suits them and the rhythm of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
With all that in mind, we've been speaking for over an hour. Maybe we want to wrap this up, but like, are there any kind of last words of wisdom or things you'd like to put out there?
I would love to see somebody do something inspired by this. I was listening to the latest High Scum podcast. No, it was the second most recent one. It was about kind of their origin stories. And they were talking about how hugely impactful going to Adepticon and seeing Johnny's Grimdark hallway was, and playing with him and be like, oh wow, I really found my people. Like he does this in a way that makes sense, and like I really want to like run with this. And then how cool it is that that lineage continued to when I went to Adepticon most recently. I went into the Grimdark hallway, and this time Johnny wasn't there, and it was them carrying the torch. Yeah. And I was like, so awesome. I want to be a part of this. And then we had the opportunity and like the honor to do our own take on it and get people to come up and play with us, and, you know, putting that forward and just like really treasuring what we have as a community. Yeah. Feels really cool. I would love to see somebody run with it next time, you know, or like do their, or even if it's like I'm in Wyoming and I like got 4 friends together in a library, like that's awesome.
Yeah, like I would have to say, like it all doesn't have to be, it all doesn't have to be a spectacle. You shouldn't do it if you're going to do something like this. Do it for yourself, first and foremost. And generally speaking, if you make it an open invitation, odds are, I think, that the people that you're going to meet at these type of meetups, you're very like-minded, and everyone is an actual kind and caring person. No one's a real jerk, right? Especially like in kind of our small niche within a niche within like a micro niche of a community. Yeah. So don't be. I would take Martin's piece of advice, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there and to put something together for yourself.
Yeah, no, that seems like good advice. Now we just have to put something together at some point.
Right.
But yeah, it was really great having you both here. Thank you for taking the time to chat a little bit about this, and like I think is pretty evident from this discussion and all the kind of posts and podcasts and stuff that's come out about this, that it was an awesome time. And yeah, I can't wait till the next sort of event and see what you all do for like forward in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, anytime.
I also want to say, if you sent stuff in, like I still have some compiling of thank yous to write. We got a lot of stuff in the mail and awesome contributions. And if you sent anything in, or just like jumped on the Discord or participated in any way, or did writing fiction for us, thank you so much. It really meant the world. You guys like made the whole experience what we hoped it would be, which is like a collaborative community event. And I know it meant the world to Bill and I.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you guys for driving down and playing with us.
Yeah, no, it was excellent.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure meeting you all in person.
Yeah, no, I think that is fun and interesting how since it is such a niche aspect of this hobby, that you can go like develop friendships with lots of people that you may not meet for like a long time, but it is really great to finally do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, all right. Thanks again, everybody, and yeah, we'll talk to you again soon. All right, well, good job, everybody. We're still live, but that part was recorded. As I'm sure you noticed, I dropped out a little bit there due to my fucking computer.
Nice.
So I'll have to pull a portion of audio from the live stream portion. So
Oh, okay.
it should be fine, but
Yeah.
It'll be
nothing's
fine.
ever easy.
No. But overall, I think the whole stream went pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
How does my audio sound to you guys?
Pretty
It
good.
sounds good. to
Crystal.
It's
me.
fine.
Okay, cool.
Someone, and I'm not sure exactly who it sounds like sometimes when they talk, like there's a very prominent noise gate that opens up.
Nice.
And I'm not entirely, it doesn't seem to go on all the time, so I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know what a noise gate is.
Like a lot of times
That's
there'll be-
official podcast talk.
Oh, yeah.
It's like sometimes you can tell like when someone has like started to speak, and even after they've stopped speaking, like the microphone is picking up audio, and after they stop speaking, you can still hear like this static sound of like the background that's being picked up by the microphone. That when they're not talking, it's usually like it just gates everything off, so you don't hear any audio from them.
Oh, okay.
And I described that poorly.
What
But-
gates it? It's not like they have it themselves muted until they're going to talk. It's not that, is it?
But it's a little bit like that. Oftentimes, microphones and stuff, you will have it such that it just isn't recording or picking up until there's like an obvious sound, like speaking directly into the microphone. But then it won't necessarily shut off immediately. And if you have like a high noise floor, like an air conditioner in the background, or you're typing on your keys, that might sort of register it and pick that up even though you're not talking. But that's not interesting. I don't know why we're talking. I don't know why I brought this up.
I don't know. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be a rude guest.
According to the Book of Rage, it's very...
Yeah.
It's like, Eric, is there a fucking question here? Move on.
As is written in the Book of Rage.
Rage. There it is. Oh man. Yeah,
So
I
how's-
think what's. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
Nah, you just talk, Bill.
I think what's really cool, and I can only speak for myself, but not to put y'all on a pedestal, but it's one of those things where you see someone whose art rocks, or someone that their work you've admired for a long time, or whatever shape that takes, right? It's one thing to kind of like look at all their work on Instagram, and you build up these images of these people in your head, and then when you do something like hold an event like Rich Grimmond and make yourself accessible like Martin did, like when Martin fucking, I don't know, DM'd me or something like that. I was like, hey, do you want to work on this event together? I was like, oh yeah, sure, but it didn't sink in until like I gave him my number and he fucking called me, and I forget. I think my kid was crying or something. My wife was like holding her, and I was like, I don't give a fuck. Like Martin's calling me. So like it's and like meeting you guys last year, like whenever you said you were coming to the Mordheim event last year, I literally was like fucking skipping around our kitchen. And my wife's like, she's like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, oh my God, like these guys, these Wire brothers said they're gonna come. Like I'm so happy. So I think it's really cool
infecting your brain.
Yeah. So I think like Martin, what you did is just so cool, man. Just like literally anyone, if they had enough money for a flight or were able to get there, like could come and meet you and throw some dice. And I think that's really cool. Like when you think of like accessibility, like making yourself as an artist accessible.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it without you, Bill. And I mean, you've got a growing legend. Like you're definitely. It was surprising to me when I was like, "Hey, would you be interested in participating in this?" And you were like, "Oh, I'm so honored you reached out. that you even thought of me. I'm like, yeah, of course I thought of you. You're the man.
Thanks, dude.
I think it's a fun thing that the this space is so like niche within a niche within a niche that we're all like paying attention to each other as sincerely and authentically as we are. That it's not just like, oh yeah, they're doing that. That's kind of cool. That it's like, oh, somebody's doing this thing that I really care about. Really watching.
Yeah, and I think also the notion, which this has been brought up a few times, kind of putting yourself out there, showing like what you're interested in working on, I think is very important if you're hoping to like really take part in certain events and stuff. Because I know for like we've had a blog for a while now, and we've been posting stuff for a long time, but you never really know what will resonate with people and what will mean a lot to people. And I know like every so often someone will say like, oh man, like this one model or this one post, like that really got me excited about stuff. And so you never really know how things will affect people. And just by putting yourself out there doing things, even as simple as like commenting on someone's post, depending on like the time of their life and like what they're going through, like that can really mean a whole lot to people. And I think, yeah, like something to keep in mind.
I have to interrupt. The noise gate is Adam.
Okay. Damn it.
The noise gate has been identified.
It is very clearly Adam.
Damn it.
But it's not all the time, though.
Or if he's talking for any period of time, it's Adam. Like I put these headphones on to listen more carefully. Like it's clearly Adam.
Damn it.
That's funny.
I'm relieved that it's not me. That's I'm happy. Good news.
Yeah.
One thing that is certain, if you post painted pictures of miniatures on Instagram, they won't get as many likes as the unpainted pictures.
Yeah. I believe
that does seem certain.
I love seeing that green stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting and probably destroying that train of thought.
Not at all. That brought a smile to my face. But yeah, no, I thought like the whole event was really cool, and it was really neat to listen to like Steve and those guys talk about it and talk about. They were like, oh yeah, and I think Martin's like whole point was to like make this like as affordable as possible. Like that was his whole intention. And so I'm glad like someone, I wouldn't say like was paying attention to that, but was at least like cognizant and was kind of like reinforcing that to people who listen to the Hive Scum guys, right? Like anyone can do it. It could be just a congregation of friends, or like this fall, like I'm not even friggin' posting anything about it. I just invite a bunch of like Texas people. We're gonna hopefully get like an Airbnb for like a weekend, just like play Mordheim and Hero Quest and just kind of like hang out.
Oh,
just
cool.
A small kind of like Texas based thing, right?
Sorry.
No, that's it.
I almost think that in some ways we like we like contradicted ourselves a little bit with like the caliber of awesome hobbyers that came through. That like I hope that people like see that what we did and still understand that they can do it, and it is still rad no matter who comes.
Yeah.
And like whatever, like the fact that like you guys and Isaac and like Johnny all and like the Hive Scum dudes all came, almost felt like, oh well, it's not like doing something wouldn't be worth it if you couldn't pull like people who are this grim dark pro celebrity or whatever, but it totally is. And I guess I just have to hope that people like obviously know that.
Yeah.
That all levels of it are really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. One thing I have to bring up from the chat and the comments, Shane or like the blind man says, "I miss the noise gate."
All right, get the noise gate. Hey, what's up, Shane?
Hey, Shane.
Oh yeah, I don't even think we. Yeah, it's like an embarrassment of riches. It's hard to like even talk about the event and remember like every cool thing that
Oh
happened.
yeah, it's like
an
fuck. Shane
overall-
had the teeth. Shane had a board.
Yeah, Shane
It's a
was giving
cool
out
board.
dice that were like these gum abominations of like teeth and gums. It's so gross. And he was just posting that he's doing going on Game Found. Is that right, Shane? With the Apocrypha, like a Kickstarter equivalent for Wave
Fuck.
2 of a project.
Martin, I hear the noise gate with you too.
No. Well, Shane, guess what, baby?
It's back.
The contagious noise gate. What?
It was really cool to see like Shane, to meet Shane, because I had no idea. I didn't put two and two together until I like met him. I'm like, oh my god, like you're the fucking blind man. Like 2 or 3 weeks prior, he had done like this crazy. I don't know if it was Morkborg. I forget what system he was using, but they spent all night and I think Fort Mifflin or something like that
Yeah.
outside of Philly, and he had like a bunch of props and stuff. Like there's a lot of like cool stuff that people do that just doesn't really like get a spotlight, right, on like
Yeah.
social media and all that crap. And like
I think it
when
was
I got to meet
Morkborg.
him, yeah, and like when I got to meet him, I was like, dude, like that is so fucking
Yeah.
cool.
It looks so rad.
Yeah.
I think they were there like all night.
Mhm.
And then I got to hang out with Shane at Gen Con, and we like met on the floor and like chatted for a while. And then I went back and played games with them, like him and his girlfriend and their friends at an Airbnb, and like played the Thing board game for like a night. And it was very cool to be like, oh yeah, this friendship that like started at Rich Grimmond. Now I've seen him again, and then maybe we'll do something soon with the Wires, since we're all like kind of in a line on the East Coast. People that Grimmond together, Richmond together, something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I think that whole notion, like, put yourself out there, and like you don't really know what people are looking at and what things mean to other people. But I think just the act of doing things like that, people are looking at things, being inspired by all sorts of different things, whether it's as simple as like some cool dice or like some elaborately converted and painted model. Like I think there's room for all ranges of like effort and skill and all that stuff. Like you don't need to be like Darren Latham levels of like sculpting and like painting or whatever, like to make your own mark on like the community and the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's like, I mean, our hobby kind of speaks to the fact that people don't all want to be at that level or see
Yeah.
people creating exclusively at that level.
No, yeah, that is true. There's a lot of ways to interface with the hobby.
I mean, John Blanche is also like somebody I think about a lot, but also we talk about in the hobby all the time. But like sometimes his illustrations are like busted, They're like very evocative and cool, but it's also like, damn, dude, what happened on this one? But there's like, it works because there's a confidence and like a enthusiasm there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like hypercritical trying to be something else. Like we don't all have to try and be the same thing or fit in the same box.
Mm-hmm.
If I may ask a serious question to Martin, what set of circumstances brought the event to be organized in Richmond rather than NOLA or elsewhere? Was it just circumstantial?
It was just circumstantial. It was I was living on the road with my girlfriend at the time, and we were traveling and tattooing. And I had worked on volunteered on a goat farm in California and met this girl, and we were like pretty fast friends. And she saw that I was like traveling around, and she was like, "Hey, if you ever want to come to Richmond, I like travel sometimes, and you could rent, or you could like house sit or stay at my house while I'm out of town." So we were like, "Okay, cool. Like that's awesome. A month in Richmond sounds really cool." And then I met Mike at Adepticon, and he was like, "I'm a tattooer for Richmond." I was like, "Well, shit. I think we're going to be in Richmond soon." And then I was so hyped after Adepticon. I was like, "This is." I mean, you guys have known me for a while through 28, and I think it's pretty obvious that like I love working like illustrating these worlds, but I don't do a lot of the mini side of it. But after Adepticon, I was like, something's gotta change. This is too fun. The energy in these rooms and like the very real cure to like a middle-aged adult loneliness, like where you have like friendships worth and like relationships outside of work and your nuclear family just really like struck a chord with me. And I knew I wanted to do something, and then we were going to be in Richmond. And ironically, that like house sitting thing didn't even pan out. So we had to like scramble and like rent an Airbnb. But by that time, like Rich Grimmond was like full steam ahead. So there was no like going back. And I was like, well, shit, I'm paying the most I've ever paid for an Airbnb for a month. But I wouldn't have changed it for anything. It was great.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
But also, I think I've said this a couple of times, but like Richmond in my brain was like close enough to Johnny Lashley and you guys that I thought I could get you both to come at bare minimum. And it just felt like a part of the country that hadn't really had an event yet. That Texas had one, New England had one, the West Coast, I don't know what they're up to, and then Chicago's got all that's going on over there. So like, it kind of felt like this space that could be filled, and that all the hobbyists there that could get in a car and make it would. So
yeah,
it's a really good point actually about middle-aged male adult loneliness, or just adult loneliness in general.
Yeah,
like because like by night, I am who I am, right? 2 hours every night in the garage. But by day, like I have a very like, I guess you would call like normie friends, like sailing friends, working oil field and all that kind of crap. And so now I'm very unabashed about who I am. And I told people, I was like, yeah, I'm flying to Richmond, and they're like, oh, what's bringing you there? Work? And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go play some games with just some internet friends. They're like, internet friends? I'm like, yeah. Like there's like this whole community.
Met 'em on World of Warcraft.
And yeah, no NBD, no big deal.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, like, well, how? That's a weird way to meet friends. I'm like, yeah, dude, what am I gonna do? Go to the gym and stare at a dude? Be like, hey man, you want to go roll some fucking dice together later?
You look like my friend.
Yeah. Please be my friend.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot, like that when I was growing up, the idea of playing D&D was like kind of sold as being antisocial and weird. But then a lot of the people I tattoo, like they have active D&D campaigns, and it's like that's one of the most social things you can do. Like it's structured, it's creative, and it's way easier to blow off like a recurring like gym or bar or whatever plans than it is D&D. And you're doing it with like 5 people regularly. It's like honestly one of the best social things I know of in America.
Yeah. Yes, and it's nice. It's a lot more mainstream now, and it's very good.
Yeah, now with Baldur's Gate 3, everyone's into it.
No, it's Stranger Things that really created D&D.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And Metallica.
Yeah, I was gonna add and popularize Metallica again.
Yeah.
They were nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now everyone can listen to Death Magnetic.
Oh, thank God. Oh,
I think
another a thing that I think would be fun for y'all's event. I know I suggested this, but let me pitch it one more time. Is like an incense burner, so you're smelling stuff, and then it would be cool if the person reading like the lore intro in the beginning and like mission 1 or whatever introducing the campaign, and then mission 3 at the climax was like in a costume and speaking through like a Vox recorder, and like some like freaky little fucking shit's going on, like where it's not like Martin standing in front of you, but it's like, well, like I'm in character and I'm like an adeptus telling you about the shrine world. Maybe it'd be too much, but also it'd be so rad.
It'd be rad as hell.
Very rad. Yeah.
I feel like you guys also are mechanically minded enough that you would be able to build like a Vox recorder or like voice modulator and like mask doohickey.
Cool,
yeah, I don't know.
cool.
We'll see. We'll see.
Commit to that.
We're not, but Eli Parsons is.
That's true.
Well, that's all we need, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't he supposed to come to Richmond, I thought?
Yeah,
he was
approved. His work approved the trip, and then unapproved
retracted.
it. Yeah,
nice.
So yeah, he just got screwed.
That sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it was sad.
Do I know Eli Parsons' Instagram handle?
Red Wet Skeleton, he goes by.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Makes lots of creepy, gribbly things.
Yeah. I remember you using gribbly specifically to describe his work.
I mean, he
would have been
for the Curse of Alabaster event, like that took place soon after the Pilgrim event. He made a whole series of these bloody flesh constructs and stuff that honestly would have been perfect for the Red Joy event.
Yeah,
like he wouldn't have had to do anything, and they would have been perfect.
Yeah, I think another thing that could have been slightly better would be just like knowing what we were doing further out. Like it was great that we could throw it together with the speed we did, but it probably put more pressure on Bill and I. Or maybe we would have just gotten more ambitious the more time we had, but I think the community could have participated more if we had just given them more time and then been able.
It was like 3 months, right?
Yeah, I could have done way more art if I had just like paced myself a little bit more, or like everything like worked the way it needed to, but
it was a short turnaround. And I know, at least for me, like I was thrilled that I was able to convert and paint a model for the event, like because how long I spent for everything, like it was tough. But I was thinking,
I was taking side bets with people.
Yeah.
What was that, Bill?
I was actually legitimately, I took a side bet with Alex Van Allen, the creator of Dead by Lead.
Oh,
and, and I was up at $20 because he was like, "Nah, man, he'll get it done." He's like, "Just wait and see." I was like, "There's no effing way." Like, I don't buy it.
Yeah.
That Ogre Mercenary is still unpainted, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Totally consumed with guilt, with jealousy.
Yeah. Bill, you remember the little Ogre Mercenary I made for... So today, someone just randomly sent me a private message in Discord asking me if I have painted said ogre. And
wow.
I told them I hadn't, but I did for your event. I went back and modified the model some more and did some more sculpting on the model, sort of to prepare the model for painting. And then he said that he found out about our stuff because he was doing some art for like an Old Hammer project, and he just like did a search like Ogre Mercenary Mordheim, and like that model came up. So it's like you never really know how people will find things and what will like resonate with them. So like, kind of neat. I need to paint
That's
set
wicked.
ogre.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody will find this podcast episode someday by looking up Book of Rage.
Yeah,
We can only hope.
as is written in the Book of Rage. We could, yeah, sick.
I'm gonna be at a fire field tomorrow doing like live burns for maritime firefighting, and I
Yeah.
swear to God, I'm gonna fit that in
The Book of
at some
Rage.
point in my safety brief tomorrow morning.
Nice.
The way to do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Maybe like
It's
at the
important.
end, like, and if you're running out of oxygen in your air tank or your air tank runs low 25%, raise your hand as it is written in the Book of Rage.
Yeah. Right.
But speaking of which, I do have to go, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
we've been babbling on for a while.
Well, I guess
But-
thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It's been a fun discussion. We learned a little bit about noise gates and stuff like that. And I think we had a lot of laughs. But so yeah, I think thanks everybody for coming. It's been a pleasure. Keep on enjoying the hobby. Stay safe, stay healthy. Until next time, over and out.
Yeah. See everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.